You're listening to episode number 31, the second of two episodes covering Tesla, Elon Musk, and the EV revolution, titled, Is Tesla Theranos or Apple? Part 6. Why the survival and dominance of car manufacturers is far from certain. Quote, what you really should have done in 1905 or so, when you saw what was going to happen with the auto, is you should have gone short horses. There were 20 million horses in 1900, and there's about 4 million now. So it's easy to figure out the losers. The loser is the horse. But the winner is the auto overall. 2,000 companies, or car makers, just about failed. End quote. Warren Buffett speaking to University of Georgia students in 2001. Can traditional automobile companies successfully transition to making EVs? Today, EV sales account for a tiny rounding error of total global car sales. Let's mentally transport ourselves to the late 1800s, where the streets were still busy with horse-drawn carriages, and the occasional passing automobile scared a horse or two. If you cannot relate to a century-old analogy, let's go back to something that happened just a bit more than a decade ago. In June 2008, when the iPhone 3G was introduced, Nokia was still the largest phone maker in the world. What we did not know at the time was that Nokia was actually the largest dumb phone maker, and that Apple was about to become the largest smartphone maker. A small but crucially important nuance. What we did know at the time was that smartphones were the future. In theory, nobody knows more about making cars than the traditional ICE car makers, the General Motors of the world, and thus EVs made by these companies should be the ones busying our streets a decade from now. A natural continuity from what we already know may be the easiest cognitive model for us to process, but it is not always the most accurate one. In 2004, Nokia missed the flip phone boom and lost market share to Motorola, which came out with the slick Razr flip phone. Nokia had a few quarters of disappointing sales. The stock declined, and we bought it. Then, Nokia came out with its own flip phone, and the status quo was restored. The company was again the king of the dumb phone castle. Actually, let's be politically correct. Mentally disadvantaged. The flip phone was a technological change, but it was still in Nokia's domain of core competency. The stock ran up and became fully valued. We made money and sold it. We patted ourselves on the back. Now, the mistake many investors made, including yours truly, was not seeing that although the iPhone was still called a phone, it was not really a phone, but rather a portable computer that, in addition to doing a lot of other smart things, also made phone calls, which the first iPhones were not really good at, but the people who owned them didn't really care. It was not Apple that dethroned Nokia. Not at all. Nokia did it to itself. Nokia should have looked at the iPhone and blown Apple a huge air kiss, thanking it for showing the future of phone, and then gone on to develop its own smartphone. I made the mistake of applying my 2004 mental model to our Nokia purchase in 2008. With the introduction of the iPhone, Apple took a mentally disadvantaged phone and pushed it into a very different domain with a very different ecosystem. Assets turn into liabilities. Nokia was a very efficient designer and manufacturer of phones that had very little software and limited functionality. In 2008, the company employed thousands of engineers who knew a lot about wireless signals, plastics, moldings, coatings, and so forth. But collectively, they knew little about CPUs, software, and user interfaces. Nokia tried to respond to the iPhone the only way it knew how, by taking its Symbian operating system designed for low IQ phones and trying to remold it into a smartphone operating system. That attempt failed miserably. We realized what was happening later than we should have, and gave up a good chunk of our 2004 Nokia gains. I never thought I'd say this, but knowledge is not always an asset. When you are in the middle of a transition from one domain to another, your knowledge of the past domain may cloud your vision. You'll be seeing through the lenses you're used to wearing. When the first cars were made, they didn't have steering wheels. They had tillers, because they were made by a horse carriage manufacturer. Though it was possible to transition from making horse carriages to making cars, most companies did not. They were stuck in the old buggy domain, and did not switch to the new auto domain. It is difficult to kill your cash cow. Clayton Christensen discussed this concept in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma. When your core business is minting money, it is difficult to create another business that may be future-proof but will undermine your core business, especially if the threat is nascent at the time and seems far away. These threats are usually nascent and far away. When Amazon was practicing e-commerce on books, everyone believed Barnes & Noble would be able to suffocate the tiny company, because Barnes & Noble sold more books in a day than 1997 Amazon sold in months. However, snuffing out Amazon would require Barnes & Noble to lower online and possibly in-store prices, which would hurt its very profitable store business. Well, we all know how that story ended. You need to have the capacity to suffer. Recode's Jason Del Rey wrote a great article that gave us some terrific insights into Walmart's efforts to compete with Amazon. In 2016, Walmart paid $3.3 billion for Jet.com. It seemed like a huge sum considering that there were no other bidders, and Jet's forecast for 2016 was $1 billion in revenue and no profits. But investors took this as positive news. Finally, Walmart had an e-commerce strategy to compete with Amazon's, and Walmart stock prices went up. Jet.com CEO and founder Mark Lowry was put in charge of Walmart's US e-commerce effort. The average Walmart store stocks about 150,000 items. The Amazon website carries about 12 million items, over 300 million items if you count those sold by the company's marketplace vendors. In addition to great customer service, Amazon offers great prices, incredible selection, and almost instant delivery. If you were an Amazon Prime customer, until recently you had to wait a full 2 days to get your purchase delivered to you. My heart goes out to you. Not anymore. Your suffering is over. Amazon will swallow an $800 million annual loss and start delivering goods to you in 1 day. Amazon can do this because it is a technological beast that is a byproduct of years and billions of dollars of investment in technology and infrastructure. Today, Amazon has 110 distribution centers in the US. Its management and shareholders have the capacity to suffer an $800 million loss in the short run, knowing that the strategy will widen the moat around Amazon's business. Walmart has 20 distribution centers in the US. For Walmart to catch up with Amazon, it needs to invest, and invest a lot. Walmart's current infrastructure is designed to support Walmart stores, but not to deliver millions of products to customers in 1 day. The Recode article details the tensions between Mark Lowry and the CEO of Walmart US, Greg Foran. Though Walmart's online sales are up 40%, in part thanks to grocery deliveries, the company is losing $1 billion on $20 billion of online sales, which is about 5% of Walmart's total sales. The company's board and Greg Foran are not happy about these losses. Walmart is still an incredibly profitable and cash-generative company, with a net income of about $7 billion and free cash flows of about $12 billion. But it is a company that has never lost money before. Losses are not in its DNA, while losses are Jeff Bezos' middle name. To make things more complicated, Greg Foran's bonus is tied to profits of both offline and online stores, while Mark Lowry's is not. You can see how difficult it is even for a company as dominant and successful as Walmart to adapt to a shift in domain. In addition to aligning incentives, it needs to have a capacity to suffer or lose money. Few companies can do that, especially when the existential threat from a new domain seems far away. Walmart stock is owned because of its safe and growing dividend. Growing cash flows are safe. Declining cash flows and a stagnant dividend are not safe. Walmart's shareholders will revolt if its profit takes a significant fall, even though that may be required to secure the company's future. This point is paramount. Walmart needs to invest billions of dollars and lose billions of dollars for a few years. Not because Walmart needs to grow, but because if it doesn't invest, it will turn into, well, the retail graveyard continues to expand. Kmart, Sears, Radio Shack, though not officially dead, they're in hospice care, Circuit City, Montgomery Ward, and the list goes on. Another important point. Amazon did not build 110 distribution centers overnight sometime in the warm of summer 2018. It built them gradually, year after year. At some point, Amazon had 2 distribution centers, then it had 5. Walmart executives were probably laughing about Amazon's losses. When investors asked if Walmart was concerned about Amazon, they probably answered, well, Amazon's sales are X, and ours are 20X. But stupendous sales in a domain that is at risk of melting away may mean very little in the domain that is coming to replace it. The same was true for horse carriage manufacturers, Barnes & Noble, Nokia, and this brings us to Tesla. The transition from ICE cars to EVs is not just a technological shift within a domain. It's not like the transition from two-wheel drive sedans to four-wheel drive SUVs. It is a radical shift into a new domain. I laid out this very extensive domain shift framework to show that the success of ICE manufacturers in this new domain is anything but guaranteed. Let me expand this framework even further. ICE cars are low IQ phones, and Tesla's Model 3 is an iPhone 3G. Cars last about 12 years, and phones 2 to 3, so this transition will happen in slow motion. Part 7. Nokia or Samsung? Why a first principles approach will be key for developing EVs. As I discussed during the transition from one domain to another, many of the assets and much of the knowledge from the old domain becomes liabilities in the new one. Tesla created its cars by entirely breaking out of the domain of existing auto manufacturers. Actually, though this is true for the Model S and the Tesla cars that followed, it was not the case for Tesla's first car, the Roadster. When Tesla first attempted to make an electric car, it was constrained by resources. It wanted to experiment with battery technology and electric engines, but did not want to design a complete car. So Tesla adapted the body and powertrain of the Lotus Elise, a sporty gasoline car. Later, Elon Musk confessed that that had been a mistake. He compared it to keeping the outside walls of a house, but gutting and rebuilding the inside, including the foundation. You might as well build a new house. Because Tesla created the EV industry, it had the advantage of acting from first principles. It could start thinking with a blank piece of paper, not redrawing what already existed. In an interview, Musk said, "I tend to approach things from a physical framework. Physics teaches you to reason from first principles rather than by analogy." Warren Buffett's version of the first principles is, what would Martians do if they landed on our planet? Not because of Martians' enormous IQs, but because they would be new to our planet and could see with clarity things we often don't, because we've been here for so long. The first principles approach allowed Tesla to build EVs that are free of the limitations of gasoline car thinking. No gears, a skateboard chassis, 2 engines, a frunk, a credit card key, a mobile app that works as a key and controls the car, and no start button, among others. Tesla applied first principles thinking to how its cars would be sold. The Model 3 feels like it was designed starting from a completely blank piece of paper, and this thinking extended beyond the car and spilled over into selling and servicing the car. Today's ICE auto manufacturers are basically wholesalers of their cars to auto dealers that are their franchise. This business model is a Great Depression relic that went basically unchallenged until Tesla came along. The model worked well for automakers and dealers for almost a century, though the experience most consumers had did not fit the definition of well. Tesla decided that the traditional business model was not appropriate for the new EV domain. Instead, it borrowed a model from Apple, which controls the full customer experience, from buying a phone to servicing it to upgrading to a new one. Also, electric vehicles have fewer parts than ICEs and thus should break down a lot less. At least in theory. Time will tell. So the traditional dealer model that relies on service revenue doesn't work well for EVs. This journey of opening its own store was anything but easy for Tesla. It had to fight opposition by ICE car makers and local dealers in every state, just as Uber had to fight taxi monopolies. My purchase of a $51,000 Tesla was as easy as my purchase of a $900 iPhone. I test drove it. A few days later, I called the Tesla store and told the salesperson that I wanted to buy the car. My information was already in the system. I had to provide it when I placed my deposit in 2015, and I had to confirm it when I scheduled a test drive. I just told the salesperson the configuration I wanted and placed a fully refundable credit card deposit. I was traveling, but I could have done all this from Tesla's iPhone app or website. A few days later, I got an email confirming my Model 3 delivery date and asking me to schedule a time to pick up the car. On June 29th at 9:30 a.m., I appeared for my car. By 9:40, I was driving it back home. It was that simple. Tesla changed how a car is serviced, too. A few weeks after I bought the car, its speakerphone stopped working. People could not hear me. I went into the Tesla iPhone app and requested service. I was given a choice between bringing my car to the Tesla service center or having a service technician come out to me. I chose the latter. 2 days later, a technician showed up at my office. I gave him my car key and went back to doing research. An hour later, my car was fixed. Tesla's technician had simply restarted my computer. In hindsight, I could have called Tesla and my speakerphone issue could have been fixed remotely. Now compare these buying and servicing experiences with buying and servicing an ICE car. It is difficult for ICE companies to adapt first principles thinking, as it requires them to unlearn what made them successful in the old domain. They are going to have to retool their factories, the smallest challenge of all. They will need to go through a significant and painful change of their workforce. Their current employees have a very different skill set and look at the world through petrochemical lenses, which explains why GM's first foray into electric was the Volt, an electric car with a gasoline engine attached. Auto dealers, which are an asset to car companies today, will turn into liabilities tomorrow, as Tesla's direct distribution and service model should provide a cost advantage once it gets to scale. Tesla's model is more customer-friendly and efficient, allowing the company to capture the profit that ICE car makers have to share with their dealers. Because a good chunk of Tesla's cars are built to order, the company doesn't need massive inventory sitting on giant parking lots. Also, ICE manufacturers may not be able to replicate Tesla's direct sales business model because they are stuck with the franchise agreements they signed with their dealers. Some ICE automakers are already waking up to the importance of electric vehicles. BMW's CEO announced that he is stepping down. Industry insiders explained his resignation by BMW's loss of market share to Tesla. The Model S and higher-end versions of the Model 3 are direct competitors to BMW cars. And, most important, by the company's lack of progress on the EV front. Recently, BMW announced that it will bring 12 electric cars to the market in 2023, 2 years earlier than expected. It won't be easy for ICE car makers to adapt first principles thinking to their EVs, but they may not need to. They can copy Tesla. The existing players are not automatically doomed. William Durant, who turned struggling Buick into General Motors, originally made his millions on horse-drawn carriages. Samsung, which was a very large dumb phone maker, successfully transitioned into one of the biggest smartphone makers today. Samsung did a great job of copying the iPhone, with Google's help. Instead of developing its own operating system, Samsung used Google's Android. Understanding the enormity of the needed investment, car makers are creating alliances. Ford and Volkswagen are working together on artificial intelligence and skateboard chassis for EVs. Historically, such alliances in the auto industry have had mixed success. Traditional car companies have a lot of things going for them. Their strengths are in the design, assembling, and marketing of cars. They use hundreds of suppliers to make the parts that go into their cars. They can do the same thing when it comes to EVs. They can outsource the battery to LG Chem or Samsung. They can outsource software design to the likes of Cognizant and DXC. We own both. They can use Waymo's self-driving software and NVIDIA's self-driving hardware. The traditional automakers are in their best financial shape in decades, and thus have capital to finance the EV adventure. Just like Walmart in its new domain, they can afford to make an enormous investment in EVs and take the losses that come with them. But will they? I don't know. To some degree, their job is more difficult than Tesla's. They have to keep innovating as they make horse carriages. Sorry, I mean ICE cars. because ICE cars are what pays their bills. At the same time, they have to focus on the future and invest enormous amounts of time and capital building EVs. When Hernan Cortés invaded Mexico, he ordered his army to burn all its boats. He wanted his soldiers to fight as if there was no way back. This is how Tesla is approaching EVs. No boats. ICE companies today seem like tourists in EV land, with comfortable ICE cruise ships waiting for them offshore. For ICE automakers to succeed in electric vehicles, they need to set up separate EV units with management reporting to the board of directors. The EV management team should be given a blank check, equity in the new company, and the ability to hire people from inside and, most important, outside the company. The existing ICE business should be run with a focus not on growth, but maximizing cash flows. It is easy for me to write this, but it will be very difficult to do, considering that these companies will need to introduce new, exciting cars every 4 years and entice customers to buy them, just to keep financing their losses on EVs. Part 8. Autopilot. Musk's wishful thinking or Tesla's greatest advantage. When you buy a Model 3 today, it comes with the autopilot feature. You can pay $6,000 for the full self-driving package. Let's start with autopilot. Tesla has another, more appropriate name for it: assisted steering. It keeps the car in the proper lane and maintains distance through automatic braking and acceleration with the car in front of you. Even when autopilot is not engaged, it works in the background, nudging the car to stay in its lane and automatically braking if the car detects that you are about to collide with another vehicle. I have mixed feelings about autopilot. It can be liberating. On our trip from Denver to Santa Fe, we used autopilot 80% of the time, as most of the road was clearly marked highway. However, when you drive on a road that doesn't have a clearly marked median, autopilot is not to be relied upon and, in fact, can be very dangerous. On 2 occasions, when the road curved and the lane markings were interrupted by an intersection, autopilot almost took me into incoming traffic. I had to intervene. Autopilot is almost ready for prime time. The problem is that the word almost should never be used in the same sentence with autopilot. An almost working autopilot is like an almost working airplane. It might lead to deaths. This is why self-driving reliability standards are measured 4 or 5 digits to the right of the decimal point. Autopilot has to be reliable 99.99999% of the time. Achieving the nines to the right of the decimal point is much more difficult than to the left of it. In a few years, autopilot will be very reliable in saving lives, but we're not there yet. Its presence may give people false confidence in the system and may cost lives. This is why Tesla wants you to keep your hands on the steering wheel even when autopilot is engaged. If the car detects that you have not had your hands on the steering wheel for 30 seconds, it will start beeping. If you ignore the warning, the car will slow down and stop. My advice to you? Listen to the car, not the people who created it. Elon Musk has on many occasions driven the car in media interviews without holding his hands on the wheel, implying that autopilot is infallible. It is not, at least not yet. I use autopilot only in bright daylight on clearly marked roads and highways, and I keep my hands on the wheel. I use the hands-off approach only when I'm stuck in stop-and-go traffic and moving at very slow speeds. With full self-driving, or FSD, the car should function just like an Uber driver to take you to the destination you entered in the GPS. Well, today's FSD is anything but that. The car will change lanes on its own if you turn on a blinker. It will exit the highway for you if you have put on your destination address in the GPS. With the exception of a few other gimmicks that are not yet fully functional, that's about it for now. Full self-driving. The car industry breaks down the levels of self-driving like this. Level 1, or L1, the car is completely operated by a driver. L2, the car partially drives itself, but the driver is there as a failsafe. This is basically Tesla's autopilot, or assisted steering. The scale tops out at L5, full self-driving, in which responsibility is completely removed from the driver. Today, Tesla and Waymo, that is, Google's autonomous driving unit, are the leaders in self-driving and have taken very different paths. Waymo has several hundred fully autonomous cars roaming the country collecting data so that software and hardware can be improved. So far, Waymo has collected data for 10 million FSD miles, which is an incredible achievement. Compare this with Tesla's approach. First, unlike Waymo, which uses LiDAR as the main sensor, think of it as radar shooting out light beams. Tesla uses cameras. LiDAR is extremely accurate, but it is bulky and very expensive. Elon Musk is not a big fan of LiDAR. He calls it a fool's errand. Tesla's cameras are very cheap, and they have long range and high resolution. Great for machine learning, but they are not as dependable as LiDAR and don't do well in extreme weather. This is why Tesla is supplementing the cameras with radar and ultrasonic sensors. Tesla has over 400,000 vehicles on the road today that are collecting data on semi-autonomous driving. Thus far, it has compiled data for 1 billion miles. Like Waymo, Tesla is using machine learning to train its self-driving system. I think FSD is a long-term goal, and that we are going to have to settle on semi-autonomous driving for a long while before FSD gets good enough to be trusted by society and regulators. Let me tell you a story. I have a friend who is a radiologist. He works from the basement of his house, where he reads X-rays and provides a diagnosis 8 hours a day. Each day, he reads about 100 X-rays. About 1 to 2 of his daily X-rays are randomly selected and reviewed by his peers to catch mistakes. If you think about it, X-rays are a perfect medium to run through machine learning. You have a very discrete data set. Humans are usually made up of the same organs. If you take a few million X-rays and mark them up, identifying tumors, etc., machine learning should be able to do a great job of spotting cancer and other anomalies. My friend, who is only a human, is prone to make mistakes early in the morning before he has had a few cups of coffee, or at the very end of the day when he is tired. Computers don't need coffee, nor do they get tired. So in theory, armed with a proper algorithm, they should make fewer mistakes than humans. However, our society may not be ready for computers to handle this life and death task. At least, not yet. And that's okay. It doesn't mean our advances in machine learning should completely go to waste. Instead of computers replacing radiologists, they should assist them. First of all, they should do peer review of all X-rays, as the incremental cost of this review is 0. They may catch radiologists' mistakes, and if they come up with false positives, that will just generate more data points that will only make the AI smarter. Second, computers can assist radiologists in real time by highlighting areas of possible concern. Instead of completely replacing radiologists, they can reduce errors and help radiologists do more. In the process of assisting, they'll get better, and at some point, years and years in the future, they'll be able to replace radiologists. This is the route Tesla is taking. Despite Elon Musk's promises, FSD and robotaxis may be quite far in our future, but that doesn't mean Tesla's autopilot cannot help drivers stay in their lanes and maintain a proper distance from the vehicles in front of them. In the meantime, Tesla is collecting millions of miles of data every single day from its growing fleet of cars. For instance, the autopilot of my Model 3 will not stop the car at a red light or a stop sign, but it will alert me if I'm about to run a red light. However, Tesla is identifying those stop signs and red lights in what Musk calls shadow mode. Tesla identifies the good drivers among the 400,000 people who drive its cars. I'm pretty sure yours truly didn't make the cut. Then, it compares the decisions the car would have made with the decisions its good drivers made at intersections. Nobody else can do this kind of analysis today, especially on this scale. Last year, close to 30,000 people died in auto accidents in the US, and 3 or 4 died while Tesla's autopilot mode was engaged. We are used to forgiving human failings, but we don't cut our computers that sort of slack. This gap between humans and computers means that for FSD to be approved by regulators, it has to be an order of magnitude better than humans in any weather and any road condition. Despite Elon Musk's optimism, we are far from that goal. In the meantime, Tesla's large and growing fleet of cars is constantly collecting data And with every mile, the cars get slightly better. This data and the algorithms that come out of it may turn into Tesla's largest competitive advantage. Part 9. Elon Musk's notorious promises. Why Tesla's future success might not be in his hands. Elon Musk is unlike any leader we've ever seen. For most people, building PayPal would have been an incredible achievement. Not Musk. He built Tesla, a vertically integrated car company and the first new US car company to survive this long since 1930. But Tesla is not just a car company that is on its way to producing a few 100,000 electric cars a year. It is a company building a charging network that covers not just the US, but Western Europe and parts of Asia. It is a company that designed a self-driving processor for its own cars. I can keep going, and I will. Elon also built SpaceX, a company that is able to send rockets into space at 10 times lower cost than NASA, and land the rockets back on a barge parked in the middle of the ocean. He's working on a company, Neuralink, that wires your brain into a computer. Okay, I'll stop. I'd argue that even if Tesla goes bankrupt tomorrow, Elon has succeeded. He has accelerated human progress decades into the future. Elon Musk, along with Tesla stock, is polarizing in the investing community. He sets impossible goals and achieves half of them several years later. The other half he will either not achieve or just hasn't achieved yet. We don't know. There appear to be two motivators behind his seemingly unrealistic goals. On one side, just like Steve Jobs, he has created a reality distortion field and convinced people with his charisma and confidence that they can achieve seemingly unachievable dreams. But there is another side to Musk. Tesla has lost money every year of its existence. There is nothing wrong with this, considering that Musk has created a vertically integrated company in an industry that did not exist 10 years ago. The problem is that these losses have to be financed, and they can be financed by either debt or equity. A company that is losing money has a limited capacity to borrow because it has a limited ability to even pay interest on that debt. Therefore, it has to finance its losses by issuing equity. Tesla is not trading on a multiple of today's or even tomorrow's earnings. It is trading on a multiple of Elon Musk's dreams. At times, Tesla, which manufactured 250,000 cars in 2018, has had a greater market cap than General Motors, which produces almost 10 million cars a year. The bigger the dream, the larger the company's market cap, and the easier it is for Tesla to finance its losses, and to achieve Elon Musk's dreams. But distinguishing which dreams will turn into realities is incredibly difficult. Not just because of the physical attainability of those dreams, but because to achieve them, Tesla will need more capital. So, to project whether Tesla will achieve Musk's big dreams, you need to have an opinion not just on their attainability, but on the question of whether others will have faith in Tesla and Musk long enough to allow the company to issue cheap equity to finance those dreams. Every so often, to keep the dream valuation going, Musk makes an announcement that seems to defy what we believe is possible today. In May 2019, Musk announced that he was expecting a network of Tesla robotaxis to be operating by 2020. Even if Musk is wrong by 2 years and this ambitious dream comes out in 2022, it will transform the auto industry and turn Tesla into a cash cow, while also putting Uber and Lyft out of business, unless they come up with their own robotaxis by then. Or does the robotaxi belong to a category of sci-fi dream that may or may not be feasible even by 2030? Before you answer this question, let me give you two more examples. In July 2017, Musk announced that Tesla was ready to take orders for solar roofs, implying that the technology was ready for prime time. 2 years on, after consumers have put down deposits, little more has been heard about solar roofs. Maybe we should have taken Musk literally, not figuratively. Tesla was ready to take orders, but the roof was not ready. Another example. In his 2016 shareholder letter, Musk wrote that he expected Model 3 production in the fourth quarter to hit 5,000 cars a week. That's 260,000 cars a year. Now imagine that you're in the fourth quarter of 2017 and Tesla is producing 108 cars a week, or about 9,700 a year. Did Musk lie to you? Or did he just dream big but fall short of that dream so far? Well, would you believe Musk's next promise to produce 500,000 Model 3s in 2018, a 50 times increase? Let's skip 2018 and fast forward to 2019, where in the second quarter we find Tesla producing an annualized pace of 288,000 cars and on its way to reach the 500,000 annual production run rate by late 2019 or so. Given these facts, when Musk makes a forecast, what is plausible and what is exaggeration? How do we know? These examples illustrate a few points. 1. Some of Musk's promises cross into the unpalatable territory of exaggeration. Are they really lies if they just happen 5 or 10 years late? 2. Even promises that Musk will deliver on will come a year or 3 later. And 3. Looking at the past few quarters brings little value in analyzing Tesla. We have a hard time processing 50 times increase in production, even if they come a year later than promised. Just remind yourself that this is the same person who was able to accomplish things that NASA could not. To make things more complicated, there are external factors like interest rates, the economy, and trade wars, any of which could cripple Tesla's valuation, thus making the company's financing a lot more expensive or completely undoable. In other words, Tesla is a path-dependent company. Its success will depend in part on factors that are completely outside its control. Part 10. Is Tesla Theranos? Tesla bears. A lot of them are people I respect. Some of them are my dear friends. Would point out that there is yet another side to Musk, the fraudulent Elizabeth Holmes side. Holmes was the CEO of Theranos, a Silicon Valley startup with a board of directors that was beyond reproach, including 2 former US Secretaries of State, Henry Kissinger and George Shultz. At the height of its hype, Theranos had a private market value of $10 billion. Holmes graced the covers of business magazines, gave a TED Talk that was watched by millions, was a role model for young women, and had the reputation of a visionary who was going to improve the lives of billions with a product that would be able to run hundreds of medical tests from a small drop of blood. Holmes may have had great aspirations, but the difficulty or impossibility, at least today, of what she was trying to do caught up with her, and she had to resort to outright deception and fraud. Theranos went down in flames. Bears argue that we are blinded by the Iron Man side of Musk and don't see the Elizabeth Holmes side, that on top of making promises he doesn't intend to keep, he is actually playing a confidence game. Bears point out that Musk committed securities fraud or stock manipulation when he tweeted that he was taking Tesla private at $420 with funding secured. This was a lie to scare short sellers out of Tesla stock. In another such move, Musk personally called a short seller's employer, threatening the employer with a lawsuit if the employer didn't stop the short seller from posting negative research about Tesla on Seeking Alpha and Twitter. Elizabeth Holmes had resorted to similar tactics. Tesla bears also point out that Musk's bailout of Solar City, a heavily indebted, money-losing solar company with a broken business model run by Musk's cousin, it would have gone bankrupt in a few months if Tesla shareholders hadn't bought it. A bankrupt Solar City would have damaged Musk's reputation as the Iron Man who succeeds at everything, and thus would have tanked Tesla's valuation and cut off the company's ability to issue cheap equity. By bailing out Solar City, Musk heaped a money-burning operation and billions of dollars of debt onto Tesla, which already struggled to break even. The bears questioned Musk's state of mind, or sanity, when he called a British diver rescuing Thai kids trapped in a cave a pedo in a tweet. I want to remind you that I started out this podcast, see Part 1, Episode number 30, quoting F. Scott Fitzgerald, and explaining that in our analysis of Tesla and Elon Musk, we needed to maintain 2 opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. There are a lot of opposing ideas here. Skeptics have plenty of substance in their arguments against Tesla. History is on their side. Other than Tesla, the last car company to be started in the US and survived to the present day was born in 1930, and 2 car companies went bankrupt during the 2008 financial crisis. Yes, Musk's stock manipulation with the funding secured tweet was simply immoral and illegal. We can vent about it, but the outraged people feel over that behavior, yours truly included, is irrelevant to Tesla's future. Musk paid a fine to the SEC and is still running the company. Any other CEO probably would have been fired and might have gone to jail. However, the issue raises a more important question. Is Musk an asset or a liability to Tesla? Well, he may be both. On one side, he is a genius and a visionary who deeply cares about Tesla's success and is willing to sleep in the factory to get things done. But he is also an incredible micromanager and a benevolent dictator who runs 4 companies. He is overworked and exhausted, and this, to some degree, explains, though doesn't excuse, his erratic behavior and his tweets too. If something were to happen to him or he was removed from Tesla, what would happen to the company? Would Tesla turn into Apple after it fired Steve Jobs in 1985? Or the Apple of 2011 after Steve Jobs passed away? The Apple of 1985 withered because it did not have enough breadth of products or the depth of management needed to replace a charismatic visionary. Jobs left a vacuum of leadership and vision when he was fired, and John Sculley, a Pepsi executive, was not up to the task. The Apple of 2011 was in a much stronger position and much more broadly based, with a stronger leadership team. Tim Cook was hand-picked by Steve Jobs and groomed for years to replace him. And though Apple as a business has done well since Jobs' passing, the company's subsequent innovation has been very evolutionary, not revolutionary. It has mostly improved the categories of products developed under Jobs, but has not come up with a significant new product category aside from the Apple Watch. In fact, it has tried and so far failed at producing a car. The Apple example shows that replacing a benevolent dictator/visionary is very difficult, but not impossible. Success depends on timing, the company's competitive and fiscal strength at the time, depth of management, and luck. Tesla today seems to lack depth of management. It's shedding executives faster than I am losing my hair. Today, Tesla is closer to the Apple of 1985 than that of 2011, and can hardly afford to lose its overworked genius/benevolent dictator. Tesla's success will be determined by the financial viability of its business. Can the business finance itself? Tesla's success as a stock will depend, in the end, on the company's earnings power. The bears argue that Tesla has quality and service issues. Some Model 3s that were rushed out to meet production goals were poorly put together. It seems that the Model 3 production quality issues have been resolved. Even one of Tesla's biggest critics, Bob Lutz, ex-CEO of GM, has raved about the quality of the Model 3's design and assembly. Tesla is growing at the speed of a Silicon Valley startup, but in addition to writing a lot of software, it is building gigafactories, a global supercharger network, service centers, and stores, and designing its own self-driving processor, all while competing against companies that are better capitalized and on the 50th iteration of their ICE products, and thus have more consistent quality. Every time Tesla has stumbled, and it has stumbled plenty, it has gotten up, regrouped, and moved forward. My personal experience with Tesla's services has been excellent, but I read that today, Tesla is still experiencing growing pains with its service. This makes sense. Its serviceable car fleet has more than doubled over the past year and a half. The Tesla technician who fixed my Model 3 speakerphone told me that his scheduling software needs work, as he's been sent to back-to-back appointments that are 50 miles apart. This doesn't sound like a permanent issue, though. A quick software fix should resolve it. One very important thing that Tesla has that Theranos did not is an incredible product and people who are fanatical about it. Tesla cars are superior to other EVs and actually to most non-EV alternatives made by the competition today. Talk to any Tesla owner and it's usually a he, will rave for hours about how much he loves the car. I have yet to meet a GM or Toyota owner who has the same fanaticism of a Tesla owner. This is why Tesla spends zero on advertising, while ICE car makers spend billions, but has a bigger sales force than all GM, Ford, and Chrysler dealers combined. Tesla has passionate owners, and its sales force is growing with every car sold. Today, it is really hard to tell whether Tesla will reach escape velocity and turn profitable before investors and capital markets lose their patience and willingness to finance its losses. By buying Solar City, Tesla has certainly made its journey more difficult. But the company is not sitting still and is trying to cut costs. Here's one example. The Model S has 2 miles of electrical wire. The Model 3 has only 1 mile. And the Model Y is expected, if it can actually be implemented, to have only 100 meters. If Tesla is able to increase its production, the incremental cost per car should decline. Let me explain. The cost of a car has 2 components, fixed and variable. Variable costs include the battery, tires, engine, etc. These costs don't usually decrease much, though they do decrease some, as a larger number of cars are produced. Fixed costs, like running a gigafactory and developing software, decline on a per-car basis as Tesla increases its production. Assuming demand for Tesla's cars continues to increase, the company's gross margin, or how much it makes per car, should increase, and thus it will reach profitability. However, even in the worst case, if Tesla runs out of money and bond and equity investors lose faith in the company, it is unlikely to follow the fate of failed car companies. Think DeLorean or Trucker. It will be bought by an ICE automaker or a Silicon Valley comrade, like Google or Apple. It would save them billions in losses on research and development and getting up to scale. Investors would still lose money, of course, because at that point, the distressed purchase would be a fraction of today's price. Part 11. Is Tesla Apple? Is Elon Musk Steve Jobs? Throughout my analysis, I have compared the Model 3 to the iPhone, Tesla to Apple, and Elon Musk to Steve Jobs. What I am starting to struggle with is this. Can Tesla become as successful as Apple? And can Tesla cars turn into an iPhone-like franchise, taking EV market share from nothing to 10% or 30% of the ICE car market? Tesla has many advantages. It is not burdened by assets from the previous domain, that is, gasoline cars. It is incredibly focused. Going back to our Cortez analogy, it has no boats waiting for them. If this electric thing doesn't work out, it is done. There is no plan B. Its vertical integration may work to its advantage, as it is competing against companies that have to rely on their suppliers and their messy alliances. Tesla's first principles approach will allow it to be constantly years ahead of the competition. Despite its zero advertising budget, its advertising department is an army of one, Elon Musk, with 27 million Twitter followers. Tesla has one of the most iconic global brands. It is run by a relentless founder who was willing to put in 100-hour weeks and sleep in the factory when needed. Tesla is years ahead of the competition on battery development. I am not 100% certain about its exclusivity though, and software. And then there is self-driving, with 1 billion miles of data, which may provide Tesla a lead that will be difficult for its ICE brethren, and even Google, to catch. The company's competitors, despite their strengths, also have the weaknesses of being profitable, dividend-paying companies that therefore have a lower tolerance for sustained loss. See the Walmart and Nokia discussion in Part 7. But is Tesla another Apple? During the first few years of its existence, the iPhone was far superior to any other phone on the market. Today, smartphones running on Android are often cheaper and may have better features than iPhones. However, through software differentiation, the iPhone runs on its own operating system, and the creation of an ecosystem, iMessage, FaceTime, and Apple Music, which run only on iPhones and other Apple-made devices, and which work incredibly well with one another. Apple has been able to create frictional switching costs that keep iPhone users upgrading every 2 or 3 years to new iPhones. Like other automakers, Tesla doesn't have switching costs or an ecosystem that locks you in. Yes, there is brand loyalty for some, but most car buyers are one commercial or one test drive away from switching to a competitor's product. Will this behavior change in the new domain of EVs? The incredible feeling that you get when you drive an electric car, the jolt you get from instant torque, is not going to be unique to Tesla. The answer to the question we're asking lies to a large degree not with Tesla, but with ICE car makers' ability to transition to the new domain of EVs. Tesla bears would argue that ICE automakers will be coming out with dozens of EVs over the next few years. So far, reviews I've read on EVs made by traditional car makers have been favorable, but the software interface still looks and feels like Nokia trying to patch its dumb phone's Symbian operating system onto a smartphone. Just as the iPhone was initially not competing much against other smartphones, but was really up against dumb phones, Tesla is not competing with new EVs, but with the 86 million ICE cars sold globally today. If Tesla survives in the short run and turns profitable, then I can see a path by which the company could start producing a few million cars a year. I can tell you one thing. Just as you cannot go back to a dumb phone once you get inoculated by a smartphone, I will not buy a gasoline car ever again. I drove my wife's gasoline car, my pre-Tesla car, a few days ago, and I was shocked by how slow and unresponsive it was. But will my next EV be a Tesla? Today, I think so, but tomorrow, not sure. Now, let's figure out how much Tesla is worth. Will Tesla's semi-truck or full self-driving cars see the light of day over the next 5 years? I don't know. But at that point, it won't matter. Let's say Tesla sells its average car for $40,000. Today, the average car in the US sells for $38,000. But with the Tesla, there are gas savings and little or no maintenance required. So I am giving Tesla a $2,000 benefit of the doubt. In fact, today the average Tesla sells for $50,000. Let's assume that Tesla will sell 2 million cars a year, half in the US and half in the rest of the world. GM and Toyota sell a bit less than 10 million cars each, so Tesla will capture 5% of the US market and a bit more than 1% of the rest of the world. If Tesla makes $8,000 per car, that's a 20% gross margin. Today, it is 18%, though this number is subsidized by environmental tax credits. Toyota and GM are at 18% or so. Musk's goal is a 25% gross margin. He is counting on Tesla's ability to sell full self-driving, which has 100% gross margins, and today creates costs but little revenue. Now, let's say all of Tesla's other expenses, research and development, general expenses, interest, and anything else, are $8 billion a year. Today they are less than $7 billion. With the above assumptions, Tesla would have a pre-tax profit of $8 billion. At 10 times pre-tax profit, its market capitalization would be $80 billion, double today's $40 billion. Neither bears nor bulls will like the preceding math excursion. Bears would probably argue that Tesla may not be able to get 2 million cars a year because it will be sunk by SolarCity's debt and losses. And if it does, it will not be able to achieve 20% margins. Bulls will argue that the above assumptions are too conservative. If Tesla can do 2 million cars, it can do 5 million. And in the meantime, while the bulls and bears are arguing, I am fascinated by how my thinking about Tesla and ICE car makers has changed since I spent a few hundred hours analyzing the industry. I don't know what probability to put on this, but I can see how Tesla can succeed if it reaches escape velocity and starts generating cash flows. Thank you for listening. This and other investment articles by Vitaliy Nelson are based on value investing principles that were first brought down from the mountain by Benjamin Graham and later were popularized by Warren Buffett. To learn more about these principles, visit investor.fm and listen to the first episode of this podcast, titled The 6 Commandments of Value Investing. To learn more about how Vitaly's investment firm uses these principles to create low-risk, long-term oriented portfolios, visit imausa.com. Enjoy life and prosper.